You may believe she's yours because she tells you she loves you, because she cooks for you, because she posts pictures of you with hearts and filters, or because she once cried in your arms and said, "I could never lose you." And while all of that feels deeply personal and real, it's easy to forget something vital. People, especially in romantic relationships, are not possessions. Love is not ownership, it's connection. And when you mistake affection for permanence, when you begin to believe her loyalty, her body, her attention belong to you, you start building your sense of self on something unstable because human emotion is fluid, not fixed. Yes, she may change. She may start to pull away. She may stop laughing at your jokes or become distant without explanation. And when that happens, it can feel like betrayal, but often it's not. It's not cruelty or manipulation, it's change. And change is part of being human. It's biology, it's psychology, and it's something too few people prepare for. If you don't understand this truth, you may find yourself devastated by something that was never a promise, but a temporary alignment of needs and desires. Let's get honest about one thing: she doesn't belong to you. She belongs to her own moment, her own emotional state, her own evolving self. You may think the connection you share is proof of permanence, but in truth, relationships are only sustainable when both people continue to grow in sync. What she responds to is not your name or your resume or your sweet gestures, it's how your presence makes her feel right now, and feelings change. We all evolve. One month you might feel like her safe place, her anchor. The next, you might feel like a memory she's slowly releasing. Not because you failed, not because she's heartless, but because people grow. And when growth isn't mutual, it creates distance. Emotional, mental, and eventually physical. This is where so many people get hurt. They confuse emotional intensity with emotional permanence. They believe today's passion means tomorrow's guarantee. But doesn't. Feelings are not fixed. And loyalty, while beautiful, is not cemented in the heat of one moment. It's nurtured over time through aligned evolution and ongoing connection. So if she's changed, if she's drifting, it may not be because you did something wrong. It may be because you stopped being aligned with her current emotional world. And no, you're not in competition with other men or women. You're in a quiet, ongoing dance with how her inner life evolves and how yours does too. The heartbreak comes when you realize you weren't just losing her. You were losing the version of yourself that existed when she needed you most. And that's the deeper grief. That's why it feels like loss. Because you're mourning not just the relationship, but the emotional connection that once made you feel seen, wanted, needed. So let's stop talking about ownership and love. Let's talk about presence, alignment, emotional truth. Because real love isn't about holding on, it's about growing together. Without expecting anyone to stay frozen in time. When that emotional match broke, so did the bond, and for many men, that moment feels like abandonment. But what if I told you the answer isn't to hold on tighter, chase harder, or plead for permanence? It's to evolve. It's to stop trying to possess someone who was never yours to own in the first place. Love isn't about control, it's about presence. So what do? You stop clinging. You stop needing forever. You stop measuring your worth by whether someone stays. Instead, you become the kind of man who lives in the moment, who is constantly becoming. Not to keep her chasing, but to stay connected to your own truth. Because when you're grounded in yourself, your energy doesn't beg, it attracts. You don't compete, you resonate. And when you're that deeply rooted in who you are, desire may stay longer, not because you controlled it, but because it had room to breathe. Let's talk about something else that can hurt to admit. You were never her only option, just her favorite at the time. And while that may sting, it's not about scarcity. It's about realism. No matter how loyal or committed someone is, they always have choices, visible or invisible, known or unknown. It's human nature. We all carry potential connections in our orbit. But here's what matters: not being the only option, but being the most aligned one. If you want to be chosen, stay curious. Stay emotionally intelligent. Stay connected to your own evolution. Because yes, when people change, so do their emotional needs. And if you become stagnant, predictable, or overly available to the point of self-neglect, you might feel her begin to drift. It won't happen all at once. First, she texts less. Then, she's busy. The warmth fades. And eventually, the distance becomes emotional, then physical. She might say she needs space or time to focus on herself. And it's easy to hear those words as rejection. But often it's not about someone else. It's about the emotional contrast you once gave her. That maybe you've stopped giving yourself. It's not your fault, but it is your responsibility. Because you forgot something essential. No one owes you permanence. You have to keep evolving, not to keep someone's attention, but to remain in integrity with your own self-worth. When you neglect your own growth, when your entire world revolves around her, you signal lack, you signal need. And eventually, she no longer sees the man she once admired because you stopped being him. Here's the truth. The man who maintains his boundaries, his passion, his time, the one who doesn't need to be chosen to feel whole, that man lingers in a woman's memory, not because he played games, but because he never lost himself. So stop imagining you're her only shot. You're not, you never were. You were one aligned connection in a world of infinite possibilities, and when you forget that, you become emotionally fragile. And finally, let's break the biggest illusion of all, the idea that you can own her. That she's yours because she sleeps beside you, calls you baby, or lets you into her life. That illusion leads to pain. Because when you start to believe she belongs to you, entitlement creeps in. And entitlement suffocates intimacy. It replaces appreciation with expectation. And in that space, love can't thrive. She didn't fall for ownership. She fell for energy, for presence, for the man who showed up whole. And the moment that disappears, the moment you try to grip instead of trust, she starts to fade. Not because she's disloyal, but because ownership was never love's language to begin with. So instead of asking, how do I keep her? Ask yourself, how do I keep becoming the kind of man I admire? That's where real power lives. Entitlement is the quiet killer of intimacy. It drains the energy that once created the connection. When you start to believe someone is yours, you often stop doing the things that made them want to choose you in the first place. You stop growing. You stop listening, you assume. You get comfortable. And while comfort is part of long-term connection, unchecked comfort can lead to complacency, and that's where polarity fades. That's where desire withers. That's where relationships lose their spark. She doesn't want to be owned now. One does. What we all want is to be chosen. Not once, but over and over again. And the moment you start treating love like a prize you've already won, you stop earning it. And the moment you stop earning it, it begins to slip through your fingers. When she leaves, it can feel like betrayal. You may spiral, shut down, or lash out not because she was cruel, but because you built your identity around the idea that she would stay. But here's the truth. She was never yours. She was with you for a time, a chapter, a season. And when the alignment faded, she did what many people do. She moved on. Some men can't accept that. They beg, they blame, they chase, they break down. But in doing so, they lose the very presence that once made them magnetic. Because here's the hard truth. The more you cling, the more you bleed. And emotional bleeding doesn't draw people. It pushes them away. People don't chase desperation. They respond to strength. You cannot own another person. You can only invite them into your world. And they'll stay as long as that world remains strong, healthy, and inspiring. If your identity collapses when they leave, it means you were leaning on them more than you were leaning on yourself. But when you're grounded in purpose, in integrity, in your own truth, when someone leaves, you don't fall apart. You grow. You get better. You move forward with grace, not bitterness. Not because you're cold, but because you understand something most never do. No one ever belongs to us. Love is a gift, not a guarantee. The men who rise after heartbreak, the ones who leave a lasting impression, aren't the ones who chase or collapse. They're the ones who can let go without losing themselves. Because they never saw love as ownership. They saw it as alignment. And alignment, by its very nature, changes. She didn't betray you. She evolved. And if you weren't evolving with her, the connection was already fading. Maybe you offered security when what she really longed for was passion. Maybe you offered familiarity when she was craving growth. That doesn't make her wrong. It doesn't make you wrong. It means the connection stopped matching her emotional rhythm, and now you have a choice. Cling to what was or rise into who you're becoming. Let go of the fantasy. Build the man who no longer needs it. Because when you stop fearing loss, when you accept that no one is ever truly yours, you stop needing to control the outcome. And in that freedom, something powerful happens. You become the kind of person others feel drawn to, not because they're your lifeline, but because you're finally living in yours. If you've ever held on too tightly while someone slipped away, if you've confused attachment with connection or permanence with love, you're not alone. We've all been there. But today can be the turning point. Comment. I choose growth. Because once you understand that no one completes you, you finally have room to complete yourself.